Dr. Radwan for this opportunity, and I'm happy to talk to everyone and meet the friends who spoke before me, who are companions on the path of the struggle for democracy. The Institute for Democracy has organized a number of dialogues, around 12 meetings between 6th of October and 15th of December, in which around 80 political figures have participated, representing the whole political spectrum, and also from civil society, including former ministers, leaders in various political parties and civil society organizations, as well as academics and intellectuals. We sought to play a complementary role with the struggle of those on the ground, which have been led by parties and initiatives like Citizens Against the Coup and the National Salvation Front, which we greatly respect, and national organizations that have given priority to action on the ground, which is a very important aspect in giving direct political messages. The aim of these dialogues was to respond to the calls or messages which we believed that the Tunisian people have given and some political elites have sent in trying to understand why the coup took place. Is there an evaluation of the decade of the democratic transition in its weaknesses and strengths, and contributing to elaborating a future alternative that can be the basis for a civilizational national project to help those forces, the concerned parties, particularly since it is the responsibility of political and civil forces that were engaged in the democratic transition and which contributed to, over the last 10 years, to this experience, through a written document, to reach an evaluation and a future vision, because we are convinced that this coup is only a temporary phase and that the democratic transition was not a coincidence, but was the result of the struggle of generations of Tunisians over decades, and that the 17th of December 2010 to 14 January 2011 was the culmination of a long process where many lives were sacrificed, where there was a lot of confrontations and battles and pain. Out of this conviction that we will return, that Tunisians will take their country back to the natural path of the democratic transition and will resume their democratic transition in order to establish a stable democracy that can play its role also in the Arab region, because it is not only restricted to Tunisia, but also applies to the region to which it belongs, and in which Tunisia, despite its small size as a country, where Tunisia has always had a significant fundamental influence in the Arab Islamic mind and in its development. So I go back to the questions you have posed briefly. And before that, I wish to remind that these meetings we have been organizing will be concluded in a conference which will be held on the 25th and 26th of January, where we will present a number of the conclusions we have reached by the friends who have taken part in these meetings. And we hope that it will be a moment for producing an important document in relation to the issue of the Tunisian people determining their democratic future. Concerning whether or not the coup has ended, I say that the coup against the democratic transition, for me, may not be over because the leader of the coup is still in his post, but politically and intellectually, I think it has ended, and very quickly. If we go back to the narrative that it was based on, that a coup of this nature came with a narrative that is based on a number of elements which justified this illegal act against the democratic elected institutions. 5 points briefly on which this narrative is based. The nostalgia of a strong president who will replace the petty elites and institutions who will take quick decisions as opposed to the decisions of democratic institutions that operate slowly. The second element is that image of parliament and the democratic government and the political elite in general, this demonized image which he worked on nationally and internationally, which he mentioned many times in his speeches. Third is the social and economic crisis that was the result of political instability as well as the pandemic. And the fourth point in these founding myths of the coup was fighting corruption. And the fifth point was the question of national sovereignty, which had been allegedly weakened because of the democratic system. These 5 myths, it has become clear to the Tunisian people in a brief time that they are false and deceptive and not true. First, the president who took all powers in his hand, as had never been done by any Tunisian president within centralized presidential systems. Neither Bourguiba nor Ben Ali had as many powers as this man. Nevertheless, he has failed, as my colleagues have mentioned, to deal with any problem. He himself continues to ask innocently. He goes around at night and asks, where are goods, basic goods, foods, and why have they disappeared? You have all powers and you cannot answer these questions. So who would be able to answer those questions? So it has become clear to the Tunisian people that this power grab and having an a sultanic president above all institutions is a deception, an unprecedented illusion. And these months have proven that this has nothing to do with the question of separating powers or gathering them. Secondly, regarding the image of parliament that has been demonized, I think the Tunisian people are discovering the truth of those plots and conspiracies of what had been plotted against parliament and all the resources put at the service in order to misrepresent and demonize parliament. The economic and social crisis, it has become clear that the worst performing government over the last 10 years was better than the government formed by this president in the face of the social and economic crisis, despite the fact that we are not fully satisfied with the performance of the democratic elected governments over the last 10 years. We believe that this, among the weaknesses of the decade, is this question, not giving enough importance to economic development and given higher priority to other questions, which harmed to a great extent the democratic transition, and given reasons to justify the abortion of the democratic process. It has become clear to Tunisians after all these commissions announced by the president to look into Tunisia's debts and all his announcements of financial reconciliation, and it has become clear that it was all a lie. Tunisia is not free of corruption, but it has the least level of corruption in the Arab region, as so this exaggerated a question of corruption, it will become clearer daily that this was only used by Kais Saied. This man who has taken all powers, can he preserve better national sovereignty? It is sufficient for us to say that for him to be welcomed in Brussels in that manner and in Washington in that manner is something that is demeaning to Tunisians, where he looked as a weak president, condemned by everyone because of by usurping powers and writing his own constitution and restricting freedoms, because we continue to say that the most powerful ruler is the democratic ruler. He would be stronger in the face of any external pressures, who is supported by real legitimacy, who would not be scared of any bringing up of any questions of freedoms or human rights, to be accused and having to defend himself through weak and unconvincing arguments. That's why I say that Tunisian sovereignty has never faced a weaker level than we are witnessing today. I conclude in 3 points. I see the Tunisian opposition, and I am part of it, through a lot of appreciation and I consider them to be responsible despite their diversity, but they are at the same time united. There is no one within the real opposition who supports the coup. Everyone is calling for a return to democratic legitimacy, and the opposition is responsible because they have chosen to put the national interest above other considerations. And this is what I heard during my visits to Arab countries and others. We in the opposition have not gone for a zero-sum game or pushed the country towards the unknown or towards chaos. We are committed to peaceful, civilized action, despite the fact that that will require more time and greater sacrifices. But this demonstrates responsibility in this critical time where for the first time in our history, where there is now a clear distinction between those who are with democracy and those who support the coup against democracy. Regarding the institutions of the army and the security forces, they are part of Tunisian society, and I do not believe that they are able to go above or away from the state of the Tunisian people. Some of the leaders of the army or officers believed that the blockage we faced in 2020 and beginning of 2021 could only be unblocked through this way. Perhaps some of them had wrong evaluations, and I believe that they will benefit from this experience to become more disciplined institutions in the future. And perhaps the most important example is the question of security unions. I have noticed in the statements of security unions that they are now praising the privileges and reforms achieved over the last decades, and their fear of losing those achievements as a result of the coup. Regarding our friends in the international community, in the US and the EU, all we ask for is to have harmony and coherence with universal values of democracy. We are very sensitive to double standards. So you might have a strong statement against the coup in Peru, against democratic institutions, something great, but we want consistent statements wherever democracy is threatened, whether it is in Tunisia or Asia or Latin America. It does not matter. We should have consistent positions because we believe that common interests between us cannot be preserved except in this way. I believe that the best to cooperate with and the best who would guarantee common interests between us is the democratic system and not the centralized authoritarian presidentialist system that brings back memories of the past, because dictators cannot guarantee anything. They just fulfill their role temporarily, but we want continuity, we want permanence, in international relations, and sustainability can only be guaranteed by democracy.